watching us now. We are here to talk about Brazilian SFF. So you're now watching the panel Spotlight on Brazilian SFF. And now it's 4 o'clock in Europe and 9 o'clock in Brazil.
11.
In the morning. 11. Okay.
11 in the morning.
I'm crazy. Okay. So it's 11 like in the morning and it's 4 p.m. here in Stockholm, Sweden. And my name is Vanessa Guedes. I'm an author from Brazil, but I currently live in Sweden. And I'm also an editor at the magazine Eita, which is a bilingual magazine in Brazil. And with me here, I have my dear friend, Ana Martino. Welcome, Ana.
Greetings, Earthlings and general life forms attending the convention. I'm Ana Martino speaking from São Paulo, Brazil. Writer, editor, translator, troublemaker, trouble solver, all sorts. Publishing in English since 2013, own the business of editing since 2016. I am one of the founders of Dame Blanche, which is a SFF Brazilian fiction. I founded that with my dear friend Clara, who's here. And the first book we published was Jana's over here. So we're all between friends. Also in English, published in BBC World Radio, Clarksworth, Strange Horizons, Luna Station Quarterly, and whatever they accept me. And when I'm not writing, also on Preterita, which is a magazine for historical fiction, my other passion. The other passion is seamstressing. When I'm not writing, I'm knitting, I'm making dresses, and trying not to put the house on fire. That's pretty much that.
Wow, it's a good achievement. And we also have Clara Madrigano. Hello.
Hello, everyone. I'm Clara Madrigano. I am a Brazilian spec fiction author. I write horror, fantasy, sci-fi, maybe mostly horror, but I love writing about everything. And I was part of the Clarion West class of 2021 alongside Jana. And I was also the co-founder of Dame Blanche with Anna. So we are among friends here. It's a family. We're very incestuous. And it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
And she forgot to say she's got Heaver. She's got the best dog in the universe.
Okay.
Sorry, had to be said.
No worries. And we also have the guest of honor, Jana Bianchi. Welcome to one more panel.
Hello, yes, my third panel, and there's a lot of things yet to come. So, hi everyone. Yes, I feel I'm like at home, because yes, Clara is my friend from Clarion West and also my friend beforehand. And Clara published my first book. Nessa is a good friend, and it's like a fellow editor in the world of magazines. So yes, I'm Jana Bianchi. I'm a writer. I write fantasy, science fiction. I just like try to write horror. I'm not that experienced on that. I'm also a translator. I translate from Spanish and English to Portuguese, into Portuguese. And I'm also editor of Mafagafo magazine. I am podcaster from Curta Ficção, one of the co-hosts of Curta Ficção, the podcast about writing. And I'm like a crazy for side projects, so it can change. Tomorrow I can have 5 other side projects. And I write in Portuguese, in English. In English, I have stories published, works published in Clarksworth, Fireside, and Strange Horizons. And yes, and I'm Clarion West alumni from 2021. So, and it's a pleasure to be here. I'm very happy to talk to friends.
Yay! Am I the only one who didn't do Clarion West here?
Me neither. So it's the two of us only.
There's still time.
No, thanks. I already studied it.
Someday.
The UEA. Thank you. I read the UEA. That's enough for a lifetime.
Yeah. So, well, we are here to talk about Brazilian SFF scene, if I may. And I was wondering, like, when we started this thing about magazines in Brazil, because this wasn't very common. We have a very long tradition of publishing SFF works in like longer forms, like novellas. I know that it's a bit wild to say a long tradition because we know that it's not that long if compared with others in historical matters. And but I think that we can say that we have some body of work by now. And but the movement of short stories is something that is new by my view. And I would like to know what you think about the stories that we are writing right now in Brazil, what they differ from the other cultures, from the other countries. What is specific or like special about our fiction now, you as writers and editors?
Well, may
Go
I?
ahead, Anna. But
I,
go, go.
I, I think that the main difference between Brazilian short stories and Anglo-Saxon short stories that American short stories do show, don't tell, and Brazilian stories go on, tell us more. We are a nation of gossips, so we want to people go on, tell more, tell more. Don't show me stuff, just tell me. And that can be a bit of a clash, especially when you have to present the work for an audience that doesn't understand telenovela, for example, which is pretty much tell, don't show. And they go, the story's taking a bit too long to begin. No, it's important. You're getting into the character. We're getting slow in here. We don't do big openings, not at first. We have the idea of the Crônica, which is the newspaper stuff, which is small events, not like hero's journey, Luke Skywalker going up on a journey elsewhere. And that can be a bit of a clash.
Like pieces of life.
Yeah, pieces of life mostly.
Yeah. Yes, Clara?
What makes Brazilian fiction so different? Pão de queijo. I can't believe Anna forgot about the joke.
Pão de queijo and capivaras.
Pão de queijo and Guaraná.
Pão de queijo.
That's what makes it so special, because Brazilians can disagree about everything except pão de queijo and Guaraná.
E o cara achou o caramelo.
Yeah. Also.
Yes.
The mongrel dog that lives in the bar. That's the one institution we respect.
But I think that the food unites us. It's our thing. Like it's the only constant thing across the country. Like white rice and black beans. So
food in general.
I can't think of a way of explaining Brazil to my non-Brazilian friends, and in the same way, I don't know how to explain Brazilian sci-fi and fantasy. We are such a mosaic of cultural influences, not just because Brazil is very culturally diverse, but because we consume a lot of non-Brazilian media in a wild frenzy. And I think lately, when Anna and I decided to, start with Dumb Bunch, there weren't nearly enough magazines as there are now.
There was Trasgo. That was it.
Yes.
Trasgo and what?
There was no
Trasgo, Taverna, and then Mafagafo.
Mm-hmm. Taverna went way after. We had Trasgo, Rodrigo Van Campen was at it for years. And he was probably the guy who brought everyone here first.
Yes. So we have this.
I think the only publisher was Draco, right? Draco was the only publisher for sci-fi.
Yeah, but he didn't do a magazine. Yeah,
and Jumbo.
Avec, perhaps. I can't remember for the life of me when Avec began.
2013-ish, 12. I'm not sure.
Yeah, about that.
Anyways,
we're a bit of a complicated stuff about what unites Brazil, because Brazil is not a country. Brazil, it's 200,000 people living in the same territory and dealing with. Exactly, and pão de queijo eventually. I don't know whether they eat that in the north. We have a bit of a trouble. The cheese bread forever. Recipes on the Discord room later on. I have one in English. But the problem is exactly we consume a lot of non-Brazilian media. And there's one problem really when you say science fiction, the immediately the image goes as the spaceship coming from abroad. So you think about speculative fiction and they think, oh, it's Flash Gordon, Star Wars, Star Trek. And, if you say werewolves or Saci or whatever, so that's speculative too.
Yes.
Just when you change the label, they go, oh, no, that's a bit of it's too highbrow for me, So it can be a bit of a clash as well.
Yeah, I want to know what Jana is thinking.
Jana is very quiet, right? But she wrote quite an accurate analysis of Brazilian sci-fi fiction for Stranger
Horizons. Yeah.
Jana, please come in.
That you say, yeah, I think like what I agree with Clara and Anna said. One thing I think Anna kind of brushed the subject is that I think that Brazilian science fiction and fantasy in general tends to focus on like smaller conflicts, because I feel that not only Brazil, I think it's some Latin America or even colonized countries stuff, I think. But I think we tend to, instead of trying to change the big thing that influences the world, I mean saving the world, avoiding the meteor to fall, avoiding the alien invasion, we are kind of trying to, go on with our lives, just live among the cows, because basically this is what being Brazilian is, living among the cows.
Yes,
It's
our
the
struggles,
surviving.
our daily
Yes,
life.
it's the meme of
based.
the dog in the fire in the room on fire. So I think that we kind of have this in your fiction too. So sometimes there is a bigger context in a story, a bigger speculative element, but we are dealing with like smaller conflicts, characters trying to do their things, because if you don't keep going, I mean, there's no way of like living in Brazil if you don't keep going with the world falling apart around you. So as I said, I think it's not specific of Brazil. I think it's I can see that in fiction from other colonized and third world countries in general. So I think this is interesting, and it clashes directly with specifically the fiction from the US, where everything is big, everything is saving the world, everything is happening in the US. So the US is the center of everything, and I think we kind of have this opposition or something like that.
Yeah, Anna?
I would like to refer to an article that Vida Cruz, I think, wrote for Fancy Magazine about exactly the problem of being small, that we are not conquering the mountain to get to the other. We are the mountain that they are conquering. So that's a bit of a problem as well. We are the foreign parts. We are the ones that colonizer came here, and we are the aliens. I have still a bit of an iffy part about it. I remember when I went to live in Britain, and I have to explain to my friends that legally I am a legal alien. And they went, well, where's your antenna? Why you're not green? Well, because that's what it means. I'm a foreign person living in a foreign country. So we are the aliens. And it's a bit of a complex idea to try to explain to them that we are human beings, just like them. We have our problems, our struggles, etc., etc., etc. And
yes, I can say.
We're not a mountain.
Yeah, from my experience as an editor in Brazil, and now I am working as a slush reader in some publications here in Stockholm. If I compare what I read from, like roughly from Brazilian compared to Scandinavian authors, for example, I think that we have the tendency to write more commentary than them. It's strange to talk about this, but I think that commentary is very important for us, and it can be in our short stories, and it brings this strangeness to the foreign reader. So it's something very different from the US, for example. Well, which makes me think that who is the reader in Brazil And what makes this reader different from the others? Is it like the experience we have reading books from everywhere or from a very specific culture, like US, for example, because we have a lot of influence from there in literature, or like it's our mix of cultures? What do you think about the reader himself or themselves? Yes, Clara. You're mute.
No,
Forgot
we're together.
about my microphone. Uh, the typical, I mean, Anna and Jenna can probably talk about it more with more authority than I can, because I no longer work as an editor, so I don't know exactly who is reading what in Brazil, but I still have the sense when I started. Typical Brazilian SFF reader is someone who reads a lot of American spec fiction, because that's what was mainly published in Brazil. And it still is quite the norm, though things have changed in the last, I don't know, 5 years or so. And we are finally figuring out the Brazilian spec fiction writers do exist. But the movement, I feel like it still belongs to a very small group of people, and we are our own readers for the most part. Those who mostly read Brazilian spec fiction also write Brazilian spec fiction. And we are still making our way to the mainstream public.
I think that one of the problems is, again, is labeling, because when science fiction is on the telenovela, everybody watches it. And yes, I think that El Clone for the North American audience is science fiction.
And Kubanacan also, please.
Kubanacan, the first time traveling story ever on Brazilian
Several soap operas.
Several. When you do soap opera, and I say telenovela because soap opera is a bit more watered than telenovela, which is shorter.
That's true. Yeah.
When you package it in the telenovela style, and I'm not talking about nowadays, but that comes from the 90s and the clone was the 2000s. I'm talking about Saramandaia, who comes from the 70s. When you package it on television, which is Brazil main media, people buy it. But book, now that's a different problem. One of Jana often jokes that books in or scientific fiction in Brazil comes in editions of 10 each, because 100 each, because that's how much is it going to pay. So how much people read it? 100 books each, because that's the number of writers and the number of readers we have. So the assumption that people make is that speculative fiction is read by young and nerdy. I will agree with the young, because the book market is focused on the young market. Old people don't have time to read. But I would a bit of disagreement about nerdy, especially after in the last couple of years, with Mafagafa going on, different formats, and ETA going on as well, and with people opening up to the idea that we can produce, that soap opera is fine for writing. We don't have to imitate, Robert Heimlich for the aperitif time. We don't have to come up with Asimov for the aperitif time. We can say, okay, I'm going to do something based on Glória Pérez, who is a terrible telenovela writer, but she works. And I want to do something like, one of the books that I absolutely loved, which is an old lady in a small city, and 80 years old, nothing's going on in the city, it's a hamlet the size of a peanut, and she discovers she's a witch. Feiticeira de São Judas Tadeu dos Milagres Baísa Próspero, which is a fantastic story. Only could happen in Brazil. O Lobo de Rua by Jana Bianchi, who is about werewolves living in rough conditions on the street. It could only happen in Brazil. Say. So we have in a bit of that as well. People finding out that, whether you live in São Luís or you live in Curitiba, where Curitiba, by the way, had the Vampire of Curitiba, Dalton Trevisan, fantastic terror story. Horror probably. If you live in horror, if you live in a hamlet somewhere in this West Country, you're part of the game too. There's room for that. So it's a bit of a constant this transformation. I'm not going to say decolonization, because that's a a lot of kettle of fish altogether. But it's a
You
process of
could.
admitting. Good. Sorry.
You could.
It's just it's something that's a subject that amazes me, because that's what we have in the Dame Blanche the last couple of years. You get more and more personal stories. So people say, you know, I am from Maracaju, I am from Cariacica, I'm from, and the stories happening here.
Yes.
And it's not in a galaxy far, far away, although I am a big proposer of Latinos in space.
I think we would have a very peculiar space.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. It would be a mess. We would never find anything anywhere, and it would never be clean. But it would work.
But it would be delicious.
But when we think about it, I'm a Dick Spence fan, and I always think about the Belders, and the Belders
Yes,
are like
I thought about them when
100%
she mentioned that.
Brazilian. They are 100% Brazilian. I mean, it's like Brazil in a nutshell applied to space.
Belters forever.
Belts forever. I
Yeah.
agree with both Anna and Clara said, and I think that when they're talking about like who are our readers, who are reading and who are publishing in Brazil, it's very hard to pinpoint because many things are happening at the same time. Many things, people are understanding what they, people are, we are, I like to think that we have like more and more readers over time in general. I'm not saying about sci-fi and fantasy only. So I think we are also having like more people finding out that they can write Brazilian science fiction, fantasy, and then we have like the when those two types of people like find each other, we are seeing people finding out that they want to read fantasy and science fiction that is set in Brazil or that is related to Brazil in some way, that's is written by Brazilian people, etc. So I think that like many things happening, and we are kind of going and trying to make things work, make kind of on the fly because we are understanding the market.
Which is a very Brazilian thing as well. We don't run.
Yes, I believe that now we are in this time that we are also forming a new generation of readers there, especially with all the work with the magazines. Yeah, this is kind of building up a new kind of reader or presenting a new way of reading to not only the younger people that are coming from this online generation, but also the ones who are our age or older than us that are also, finding out this. I think we are also changing the way we read, right? Because now we have ebooks and we are getting used to read shorter texts because of internet and how it is now. So maybe the short stories are playing a role on this too.
And also, I think we are kind of like seeing people, when I talk about writing too, I think we are in a movement that I think it's not Brazilian at all. I think it's a global movement of being proud of who you are more often, and also wanting to talk about it. So I think like people are starting to realize that they have like that being different and being able to write about it is a power instead of something bad, something that you would try to avoid or to hide. So I think that, and it happens with readers too. So people want now to read, they of course we always want to read things about people that are different from us. This is not a problem, and it was never, fiction is about it in general, but people are trying to read stories that are like set in the place they live or in a place that they can identify, or is like the main characters are similar to them. So I think that it also is kind of matching, like people are writing about who they are, people are wanting to read about who they are, or about people they know in general, and things are kind of matching. So I think it's a special moment, I think, in Brazilian I think Brazilian also, but I think in Brazilian science fiction and fantasy.
Yes, go ahead, Anna.
I think at one point that you mentioned about oh sheesh, it's hard to speak the word. It's how to get to the word, because I'm 41, and when I was a teenager, getting books of any kind was quite the challenge. And you had some books in English, you had to go to specific bookshop and hope that they would bring it, etc., etc., etc. Nowadays, it's pretty easy. One click, it's on. And that opens possibilities to stuff that we didn't have. Brazilian society, literary society overall, is pretty much insular. It's either North American or French, British sometimes. And nowadays we can get to read stuff from Africa, for example, or ironically enough, Latin America. I mean, the first time I read one of my favorite sci-fi books is Trafalgar by Angelica Gorodischer, who's Argentinian, and I read it in English. I mean, wow. Argentina is just next door, and I read it in English because it makes no sense. So it's a bit of an opening up as well. And the movement that Jana mentioned about being proud of your influence or being proud of your heritage plays a main role as well. And it connects with what we said about we're not show, don't tell people. We are not big, big guns, Michael Bay kind of stuff. And what you gonna do about it? That's pretty much that. Instead of going in and say, okay, I'll write whatever is little, fix it, and you know what?
It's like a collective effort as well.
I mean, if you have an international magazine that accepts global writings from around the globe, and you're not getting neither Brazilians, nor Nigerians, nor Mexicans, are you actually open to the global market? We're that noisy. Yeah. And I love that. I love the idea of being noisy.
Yes, I think we are pretty much noisy, and we are getting noisier even more, like in this SFF community now. So as an editor, I have also a question about the Brazilian stories that we're publishing now. Do you feel that if there is like a common theme that people are writing now in Brazilian fiction in general? Do you think that there is something recurrent?
I think there is something. Oh, sorry, Clara, do you want to?
No, go ahead.
Go, Clara. Go ahead.
You raise your hand first.
Our collective trauma. That's what we write about.
Well,
trauma.
I mean,
the trauma.
How could we not? How could we not?
Yeah.
Especially in the last 2 or 3 years, especially the coming of age writers for 20, 21, 25. They were born in a world that no longer exists, and it faded this fast. And they are writing about rediscovering and trauma and getting to realize, okay, what we do from what we have now. Writers from my generation, Clara will probably agree with me, coming from a place of slight stability, political and economically wise. So we could come up with the idea of, okay, reaching for the stars, reaching to the top, getting better. And nowadays is a bit of, okay, the traumas from previous generations are still on, and what are we going to do from here onwards? Because one thing that's been pretty common as well is the idea of generational trauma. And this particular generation of writers, upcoming generation of writers, is not playing ball. They're not going to carry the weight. Like, it's your problem, you fix it. What do I have to do to not end up like you? So that's one common thing that I've been seeing on submissions to Dame Blanches. You deal with that. From that, yes, your problem. How are we going to deal with what happened from now on?
What remains?
Amazing. What remains? So one Brazilian characteristic is to be absurdly hardy, like a shrub, like a prickly shrub. So that you cut it, it grows again. You cut it, it grows again. But it gets a bit tiring of, cut. And so, okay, so what about not cutting this time? I guess that's pretty much the theme. What about not cutting this time? So it's a common thread. Let's take over before anything else happens. But it's something I've been seeing. I don't know whether Jana gets that in Mafagaf as well. I get longer works, so it's what I'm getting is a lot of dealing with generation trauma. And okay, you guys screwed up. I'm here. Had nothing to do with this. What do I go from here? But we're putting some fantasy in it just to make it palatable, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree. Oh, do you want to say something?
No. Keep going.
I totally agree. And what I see, I think it has some relation to that. But I think that I also see many stories about identity and who we are, because I think this is something that it will bugs Brazilians forever, because we are many things at the same time. So we are saying that what unites us is the pão de queijo, but jokes aside, we are a country that have many influences and many things like in common across the country, but also many things that are very different. That is not something specific from Brazil. You can see that in the US, an example, that's a big country with lots of influences too. But I think they kind of have this idea of identity, of general identity, in a way that, of course, if you go to smaller communities, then you have this this dilemma too. But I think that we have this thing about like finding who we are, who we want to be. And I think this is something that is a main theme of literature in general. um and I think it's a theme that is usual in speculative fiction too. But I think that I see many stories about that, Sometimes it's not clearly the theme, but it's there in a way. You can see that maybe the author don't know about it yet. Maybe the author
It's
is
unconscious.
writing, yes,
That
is
conscious.
writing, exactly,
You
is
are, you,
writing about something, an external conflict, but you can see that they're
Yeah.
talking about who they are, or
yeah.
not specifically in an individual level, but sometimes like who they are, who are the community they are inserted in are. So I think this is
Yes.
a very recurrent theme.
Do you think
You
that
never know.
people from,
Oh,
sorry?
sorry, I was going to say, you never know what you're writing about until you finish writing.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
Yes,
And
the
true.
most
maybe
Yeah.
important thing.
and maybe
And
until sometime tells you that you're like,
yeah, till someone points you.
that's
It's like
Yes.
what people say about stories about changelings and shapeshifters. That is about identity as well,
Mhm.
about changing
Hmm.
stuff, changing face. And I have to add one more thing as well, just before the next one, a bit upgrade about identity. Which first thing about Brazilians I have to explain to the outside world is we don't have a national creation, an idea of like George Washington crossing the river, or Queen Elizabeth in the guiding the troops, Shakespeare, that sort of stuff. We don't have a formation myth, and that plays on a good side. We can be anything we wish to be, and on a bad side, we don't have the slightest clue what we are supposed to be. And people are we spent the previous generations doing two military dictatorships instead of one. I'm talking about Getúlio Vargas and then the military junta, 64,
Hmm.
85, imposing a national vision on what are we supposed to be. And our parents grew up with this idea of what a Brazilian is supposed to be. A Brazilian is supposed to be this, a Brazilian is supposed to be that, a Brazilian is supposed to like football, a Brazilian is supposed to salute the flag. And identity is also about looking at this consciously and saying, no. So that's what I think, that especially on Mafagafo, which is the Faísca, which is shorter stories, so having less time to shake it. You can see
Hmm.
that a lot. It's about nope.
Yeah.
We
I
don't know
think that
what
we
we're
also
going to be.
had this historical moment in when we started to produce books in Brazil, like 3 centuries ago, more or less, 2.5. This effort to create this national identity through literary works. So we have Indianism, we have
Yeah,
naturalism, and these are also like how we were shaping who is the Brazilian, what means being Brazilian during that time when we had like many wars that were trying to unify the country, when everybody was trying to proclaim their own independences. So it was
we've
a
been trying to
turbulent
find out.
time.
Yeah, we've been trying to
Sorry?
find out what the heck we are. We had what the hell we are for the last 500 years.
Yeah. Clara? You're mute.
We still have a very weird modern version of Indianism, which is indigenous people are elves. A lot of fantasy writers used to, I want to write the Brazilian Lord of the Rings, so I'm going to steal everything
No.
about indigenous
Yeah.
cultures and pretend they are elves. And well, that's something we have to do with.
It's a whole new thing. Yeah. It's not so new. Yeah, it's the new Indianism. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
Do you think I have a question regarding this topic? Do you think that people from abroad can learn something through this literary works we are producing now, through this identity crisis we are going under now?
I think they can learn to learn. I think this is something because we are talking about that some in a panel that Vanessa was moderating yesterday about translation. We talked about that subject, and I was thinking about talking with friends about that too. Um, we talked about like sometimes you use a city in Brazil as an example, and people tend to think that's a non-existent place because they don't know, and it's okay. You don't need to know all the names of the cities in Brazil, but we tend to go and search for things. So if you see a different word, a different place, we can Google that. We are in 2022.
yeah, Google works both ways.
Yes,
Google
exactly.
works both ways.
And then people are like, "Oh, I'm confused. Maybe you should make it clear that it's a existent city." And come on, I don't need you don't need to make clear that it's a small city in, I don't know, Texas. I we if I have like, oh, is this a real city or not? I can go and Google or whatever. I can assume what I want and then just deal with that. And I think that as Brazilians, but also as known Anglophone people, we have like this, uh, go search for it, go research. If you talk about Brazilian dictatorship, you don't need to know everything about that. I don't know everything about like the secession wars, but if I want to know more, I go and read about it. So you can go and read about something that is not about your country. So I think
It's
that we
easy.
have, yeah, it's easy. So whenever I can, I throw in like references, of course, not trying. Of course, I have this idea that the story can't be too confusing, not only because our people from outside the country, but even in Brazil, as I said, like if you throw a lot of references from some region, you may not be understood by other people. But whenever I can, I throw references. I was talking about Renan Bernardo's story that's about Brazilian dictatorship, and he talks about like the years of lead. Okay, so if you don't know what is it, you can go and search about it and research about
Yes.
it. So
Wikipedia
Clara?
is good for that too.
Maybe we should start our stories with info dumps about Brazil. Curitiba, a real city. Pão de queijo, a little
A real
pretzel with cheese, delicious.
real
Guaraná, I
food.
can't explain, you have to taste it.
guy. It's like
Yes.
it's like the eternal discussion in translation. Should we put the foreign words in italics or not? If we put it in italics, I'm against it, but but we have to make sure that it's known that it's a foreign word mate. You're reading it.
Footnotes or not?
Footnotes and. I mean, I lived in Britain for quite a long time, and I say as a joke that if I learn how to say Leicester and not Leicester, you can learn how to say Araraquara for goddamn sake. I mean, it should go both ways.
Yeah, that's true.
It's also it's also a matter of sorry. It's also a matter of what goes for culture. Jana mentioned Renan Bernardo, and he mentioned a story once on Twitter that he wrote a story about military dictatorship, and one of the readers who was American said it's a bit weird the way you're talking about the military, as if they didn't have any respect for it. And he went, "You're American, right?" I mean, the way the U.S. sees the armed forces is the opposite of what we see the armed forces. So context is in the text. Read it up, and Wikipedia is your friend. Honest. Come on, be
Yes.
brave.
We live the best of the times. We
Yeah,
we can know everything about
Everything.
everything. Yeah, so we are like in our last 10 minutes. So I have a last
Oh.
question, and maybe this one would take some time to answer, but I would like to know, in your opinion, in your experience, how you would describe the Brazilian, like the local writing community. How is the state of the writing community now there? Who wants to start?
Not everyone at
I
once.
think that we are like everybody in the same boat, and I think that most of times we know that. So of course there are people who are, like not caring about community building at all. There's always those people. But I think that in general, we are those who didn't realize yet are realizing that we are not in a ideal state of market, that we have much to grow and have many things to fix. Use this word that can mean a lot of things. So we have a lot of things to fix, and we need to do that together, otherwise it won't change, because this is something Brazilian too. If you don't go and do that for yourself, nobody is doing for you. You need to know that. So you need to, if you want something to change, fortunately or unfortunately, you need to go there and do at least a bit. Of course you won't change it alone, but you need to do at least a bit. So I think we are in this moment of knowing that we need to do something, and that the only way to do that is to join forces. And of course, it doesn't mean like agree with everybody in the market, but I think that we need to, and also I think that people are starting to realize that the market is it's a professional field. So of course it's made of friendship, of course it's made of you know it's fun too, but it's like something that you need to face as you would face your approach. I would say you should approach it as you'd approach another work, another job in general. So it is not, não é várzea, it's not Casa da Mãe
It's not,
Joana.
Yes.
it's
You
not
can
Casa
do
da
anything you
Joana.
want. Yes. So I
It's
think
not
that
a mess.
I think we are in this moment of, okay, this is what I need to do.
Yeah.
And some people are going towards that. Some people are, starting to realize, but I think that we are kind of moving toward what is ideal.
It's a work in progress, right? Clara?
I think we spend a lot of time on Twitter. That's what I think. And that's the famous autocritic.
Self-criticism.
Criticism.
Yeah.
Well,
okay. Yes?
One thing that we have in common as Brazilians is that if it doesn't exist, we'll invent it. And we have done that with the market. The ladies here are living proof of that. And as John said, yes, we have to come on to with a bit of approach, a bit more professional, even though writing and editing is most of the time a second job or third job to what we do. And the
fourth job.
Fourth job. In my case, it's the first one, but it took me lots of layoffs to get to that point. But the thing is, and that's one thing to think about as well, we're here, we managed so far, and if we want things to progress, so what do we have to do in order to things to progress? Because it's easy to just, well, let's Casa da Mãe Joana, the big mess. So we have to sit down and think, what is it needed in order to progress? I don't like the idea of everyone in the same boat. I like to think that we are in the same sea. We know different little boats. Some boats are better than others. Some have been floating for longer, but it's all in the same waters. So we have to check on everyone. But some boats are smaller and starting now from regions that don't have the same access as we do, and so forth. So we have to check on one another.
I like this analogy.
Yeah, I think maybe we are not in the same boat, but we're being hit by torpedoes. Like all of them are
all the time.
Yeah,
by the same torpedo.
Alarm.
Yeah,
we are in a Michael Bay movie. That's it.
Yay.
But it's more or less what we were doing at ETA magazine when we started, because we were seeing amazing authors publishing in Brazil, and they couldn't publish in English, so people abroad couldn't see this amazing work. And then we started to do ourselves the work of translating them, because if we would sit at home waiting for someone to, like, the goodwill from someone from some other place to help us, this would not happen. So as real life, like mundane life in the writing community, it doesn't change.
In the wise words of Barão de Tararé, a Brazilian humorist from the 20th century, the only thing that falls from heaven is the falling plane. Everything else is bananas.
Yes. Exactly. And birds occasionally.
And birds.
So to sum up, if you want to, like, recommend some work of yours or recommend some other author, your social media, this is the time. So we were closing the session in a few minutes. So if you want to go ahead, Clara, and then we go through the table.
I am Clara Madrigano basically everywhere, and on Twitter and Instagram, and I'm usually posting about books and things I have read and liked and my own personal stories. So check it out.
Yes, thank you. Jenna?
Yeah, I am mostly on Twitter. Jana Pebianchi, I will post my handle here in Twitter. And I want to recommend a work of Dante Luiz, who is here watching us, because he has a kind of index with everything that Brazilians write and are published in English. So he has some rules there. I think no indie publications, only stories that were published in anthologies, magazines, and in publishing houses by some editors organizing. So I think it's an amazing index that our works, like, from, it's not only it's contemporaneous, but it has some works from previous decades and years.
Yes.
So I think it's a good place to go if you want to know what Brazilians are producing, where they are publishing, and you can pick some stories there.
We can post the link later on when this video call goes on YouTube.
Yes.
Anna?
I check. Well, I am annamartino.com. And Anna with double N, it's Italian, as the Disney princess. My Twitter, Instagram, and books are out there. So check it out. And as of recommendations, please do keep your eyes open for the newcomers. Liz Villas-Boas, Fernanda Castro, Thiago Lage, who is going to be with Jana later on an interview. And listen to Eita. Eita is coming up, it's quite strong. Keep a nice pills, because we're pretty much everywhere and we're not going out. We're getting to the party, now we stayed on it. But
we got a panel here. So this means something.
We managed to get a panel. That means something. So annamartino.com, if you're into whimsy and weird, and I have a reading tomorrow, time 43 here. So if you want a taste of what Brazilian tales sound like, call me.
Yay.
So
yeah. Thank you all for coming here and participating on this panel, girls. I loved our conversation. I wish we had 3 hours to go longer. And thank you everyone who is watching us right now and who is watching us on YouTube afterwards. So my name is Vanessa Guedes. I'm an editor at Eita Magazine, and you can find me on Twitter under the handle Vanessa in Pixels. So thank you everyone, and I'm closing it exactly and the 50 minutes.
The power of the
Yay!
Ciao!
Thank you. Ciao.